Bibles tonight to the book of Esther, chapter 1. I'm going to begin with verse 9, and I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce all of the names in verse 10, so I will read verse 9, and we will tell you what verse 10 is, and then we will read verses 11 and 12. Esther chapter 1, verse 9. Also, Vashti the queen made a feast for the women in the royal house which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded the 7 members of his cabinet. That's what these men were. They were members of his cabinet. They were his closest advisors. They were the ones that had the innermost access to the king. So he commanded them, the 7 chamberlains that served in the presence of Ahasuerus the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the crown royal, to show the people and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. But the queen Vashti refused to come at the king's commandment by the chamberlains. Therefore was the king very wroth, and his anger burned in him. Most people, when they think of the book of Esther, are much more familiar with Esther than they are with Vashti. And yet it was Vashti that opened the door for Esther to eventually become the queen. Vashti was quite a lady, especially in her day and time. She was an extraordinary lady who had lots of guts and was willing to practice what the Bible taught and what she believed God wanted her to do. Well, this is certainly applicable to women. Obviously, Vashti was a woman, and the commands and the things that we're going to look at are things that we men typically aren't going to be asked to do. But the principle that she laid down is the same principle that applies to every one of us, men or women. So we're going to look at her. My points are very easy. We're going to look at her, first of all, her history, the choices she made, and the consequences of those choices. It's been said that every decision has consequences. Well, I don't know about every decision, but certainly there are many decisions for which we need to be like Jesus said in the New Testament. We need to count the cost and say, am I willing to pay the price to do what I know is right? First of all, notice her history. Now, it starts off that she is the queen to King Ahasuerus. And if you can't pronounce all of these names, don't worry about it. It took me 4 years of college to learn how to pronounce some of them. But Ahasuerus was the greatest king on earth at that time. He was the most powerful king on earth at that time. He was one of the richest kings on earth at that time. He was a mighty, powerful, very strong king. And she was his wife. I was going to make a joke, but my jokes never go over, so I will forbear. As the wife of the greatest king on earth, she enjoyed tremendous privileges. She enjoyed tremendous wealth. She had the nicest clothes. No, resale stores, no used stores, no stores where, you pick up cheap items because they're cheap. She had the nicest clothes that money could possibly buy. She had servants that waited on her. Anything she wanted, all she had to do was speak, and she had all kinds of servants who were right there at her beck and call, and whatever she wanted, their job was to make sure that she got it. She had the best food that money could buy. My wife and I have enjoyed fishes for most of our married life. And so we took one last splurge today. We went over on Dream Street. Wednesday, they will be closed Wednesday, never to open again. But we went, and it's like, what do I want? Do I want, the Buddy Boy? Do I want the Brawny Lad? Do I want, She didn't have to think about food. She had the very best food that money could possibly buy. She threw a tremendous big party for all the women that were in the royal house. The king is throwing a big party. She threw a big party. And if you know anything about parties, they can get expensive. Especially when you have the very best of everything. You want the best service, the best food, the best dishes. You want the best of everything. And so she said, I want a party for all the women in the palace. And her servants went to work and fixed a party that was fit for a king's wife. History tells us, if you can believe history, that she was eventually brought back after she was fired. She was eventually brought back and worked in Ahasuerus' government, but she was never allowed to be queen again. She worked in the government. She worked in the palace, according to history, but she would never, ever be king or queen, and she was never allowed to see the king's face again because of the choices that she made. Notice the king threw a king-size party. You read there, and he had the best decorations. He had the very best of everything, and they had wine abundantly, although no one was compelled to drink. They had the best dishes instead of not saran wrap, but those dishes, what are they called? Somebody help me out. Whatever they are, we have cheap dishes. It's whatever we catch on sale. They had gold cups, gold plates, solid gold silverware. Everything was solid gold. And they had the very best wine in verse 7, royal wine, not just your cheap run-of-the-mill stuff. This was royal wine in abundance. Verse 8 tells us nobody was compelled to drink, but almost everybody most certainly did. And so the king, in his drunken state, He was very drunk from all indications. He decided to show off. Now let me throw this in, and this includes a lot of things. Anything that makes you lose all sense of reasoning and logic is wrong. It could be alcohol. I have never drunk beer. I don't know what it tastes like. I have no idea to find out. The smell makes me sick. I don't drink alcoholic beverages. But I have seen people who drunk to the point that they lost their mind. I've seen them do things that they would never do if they were sober. But the more they drunk, the drunker they got, the more they lost all ability to think and reason and rationalize, and the more stupid things they did. So it could be alcohol. It could be drugs. Years ago, when I was working at the hospital, deputy sheriff brought a man into the emergency room. He was on some kind of drugs, and they brought him in to see if the doctors could give him something to counteract whatever he was on. They ran some tests and found out what he was on, and then they started trying to counteract it. But in the meantime, he decided he didn't want to be there. The deputy tried to hold him down. 2 deputies actually tried to hold him down. They could not hold him down. Hospital staff came running, and there was like 6 or 8 of us, me included, that are trying to hold this guy down. But he was on such a drug that gave him almost supernatural strength, literally, that he was out of his mind. Took 6 or 8 of us just to hold him down, and then they finally got him strapped to where they could do something with him. Anything, whether it's drugs, whether it's prescription or over the counter or in the black market, anything that takes away your reasoning and your logic is something you don't need to be messing with. You don't need to be messing with it. It could be anything. Years ago, they were into sniffing glue because they could get high, until a bunch of people died because the glue melted their brain and they died. And I haven't heard of sniffing glue now in a long time. But there's all kinds of things that people take that literally takes away their ability to think rationally. Under the, being drunk, Ahasuerus said things and tried to do things that he would never have done sober. He made decisions that no doubt we know in chapter 2 that he regretted his decision. But the decision was made, and there was no taking it back. You see, the problem with alcohol, drugs, and all those other things is they make you do stupid things. But once it's done, you can never, ever take them back. It's done. You get behind the car drunk, I can drive home safely. You get behind the steering wheel, you hit somebody head on in their lane because you crossed over, and you kill somebody. Guess what? You're probably going to be tried for involuntary manslaughter or negligent manslaughter or something. Well, I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. You were responsible for getting drunk. Nobody made you get drunk. And once you got drunk and you got behind that wheel and you killed somebody, there are consequences. Ahasuerus made a absolutely idiotic, stupid decision. But it stayed with him for the rest of his life. Keep that in mind. I had an uncle that was an alcoholic. They lived in Arizona, but they would come home to visit in Tennessee every 3-4 years. They would come home to visit the rest of the family. And every time he came home, every time, he would find the closest bar, get drunker than a hoot owl. They called my dad to come get him. Dad found him in the middle of Madison Avenue. You know where Madison Avenue is. He was in the middle of Madison Avenue, standing in the middle of the road, singing and all kinds of things. It's a wonder he hadn't got killed. But once he got drunk, he had no control of his mind or what he was doing. And so the king issued an order. He told his 7 cabinet members, go get Vashti. Bring Vashti the queen with the royal crown to show the people, men, that was all that was there, and the princes her beauty, for she was fair to look on. In ancient times, women were not allowed in parties where there was all men, except for one reason and one reason only. She had her party, he had his party. The two did not mix and mingle unless he wanted her to come in and show her beauty. It was not simply a meet and greet. It was not, honey, I want you to meet so-and-so. Isn't she beautiful? Wasn't that at all. When a woman was called in before a group of drunken men, they only had one thing in mind, and it wasn't just to show her outward beauty. It was to show her body and appeal to the lust and the desires of a bunch of wicked, drunken men. Honey, I want you to come and show everybody how beautiful your body is. What husband would do that? I don't know. Probably the same type of husband who lets his wife run around with practically nothing on, lets his daughters run around with practically nothing on. Same idea, same principle. To a crowd of drunken men, this would only appeal to the lust of their flesh and make the king look like, wow, he is really a nice king. He is sharing his wife's beauty with us. And so the 7 members of the cabinet went and said, the king wants you to come and show your body to these drunken men. And Vashti, in verse 12, refused. Now, many of us grew up with the idea that the wife is to submit to the husband in everything. In the 33 years that I've been here, I've had a few instances. One man particularly, I had met him once, but I didn't know him. He called me one day and said, do you do marriage counseling? And it's like, I tried to limit it to members of the church and those who attend on a regular basis. But do you do outside marriage counseling? Not usually, no. I said, what's going on? He said, well, we have some serious marital problems. And I said, what is it? I said, what do you want me to do? He said, I'm fine. I have no faults. Can't make this stuff up. I'm not the problem. The problem is her. I need a preacher or somebody to tell her, and this is almost a direct quote, I need somebody to tell her that she has to obey everything I say, regardless of what it is. She has to obey me in everything. And I said, I can't do that. I can't do that. Because I don't believe that. I think Vashti is an excellent example of a wife who absolutely refused. I had another man. My wife and I knew him and his wife. Sweet young lady, very nice young lady. He was one of those where I'm the husband. I don't have to work. You go out and get a job. You support me. You bring the money home, give it to me, and I'll decide how it's spent. I'm the man. I don't need to work. He called and wanted me to counsel. And it's like, no, trust me. You do not want me counseling you. Got to where I quit answering the phone. He would call 3 or 4 times a day. And it's like, I am not going to deal with somebody who thinks that all he has to do is hunt and fish and watch TV and eat and do all those stuff. I'm not talking about you. All he has to do is just allow her to wait on him hand and foot. She got up, went to work every morning. At the end of the week, she brought her check home. And he said, thank you, now go get my supper. This house is filthy. What have you done all day? I said, are there people like that? Fortunately, not many. But Vashti refused. I will not make my body the object of the lust of a bunch of drunken men. And so she absolutely stood firm. I've met some really weird people over my ministry. I don't run across these much anymore, but growing up, Women were only good for two things: cooking and appeasing the lust of a man. The only two things women are for. You cook and clean and satisfy me. After that, I don't want you around. Honey, get in here and show your body to these drunken men. No, I will not. She knew exactly what he was asking, and she refused to expose her body to a bunch of drunk men. Are there ever situations where the Bible and common sense gives a wife permission to disobey? I'm getting some yeses and some I have no idea. I have said as long as I can remember, which is yesterday, but I have said for years, if it's immoral and illegal, you not only have the right, but the responsibility to say, I will not do something that is blatantly immoral and illegal. What if your husband tells you to go shoot somebody? You know, honey, I want you to go shoot this lady right here. I want you to shoot her. I don't like her hair. That blouse is hideous. Go kill her. Yes, yes, master. Yes, yes, master. No, that's blatantly illegal and unscriptural. I want you to commit adultery with my boss so I can get that promotion. No. No. That is immoral. I will stand behind a lady who is standing on morality and legality. I will stand behind her as long as possible. There's no indication that she was drunk. You read about the men, they've got wine in abundance. You don't read the women getting drunk. And she knew perfectly well what she was doing, and she made a conscious decision based on her convictions not to use her body in an inappropriate way. Notice the consequences. And I'm not going to read all of this, but the 7 cabinet members of Ahasuerus' cabinet, when she disobeyed, they get scared. If she disobeys and gets away with it, our wives won't obey us. We've got to make an example of her. We've got to show her and all of our wives that they cannot disobey and get away with it. And so they go to the king and say, King, Vashti has not only insulted you, but she has now insulted us. And if she gets away with it, there will not be a woman in the kingdom who will follow her husband. The king said, well, what do you advise? We advise that she immediately be fired as queen and banished from the presence of the king. The king said, sounds good to me. Do it. And immediately she was fired and banished from the palace. Think about it. She lost her job. Now, if you count being queen a job, she lost her home. She lived in this great big, huge palace. Now she's kicked out, no place to live. She lost her reputation. Her name was forever smeared among the people of Shushan the palace. All because she took a stand for what was right. What about us? And it doesn't matter male or female, the principles are the same. How many people make a decision out of fear of the consequences? If I stand for what's right, if I stand on the Bible, if I stand on God's Word, I could be fired. I get a letter every month from Christian Law Association. They were in Florida for many, many years. They now have moved their headquarters just over in Ohio. And I've used them quite a bit this year because of different things that are going on. Their ministry, and it is a ministry, is to help churches and individuals fight for their God-given, constitutional given rights. One of the things that they have almost every month in their letter, they give certain prayer requests. Almost every month there are several prayer requests. My boss told me that I will now be required to work on Sunday or be fired. Well, if you didn't know it, that's illegal. Y'all know that's illegal? They can't do that without cause. But anyway, that's another story. I was arrested for handing out tracts in a subdivision. I could lose my job if I tell my boss I will not do certain things. I need you to lie. By the way, this is one of my pet peeves. If you're blessed enough to have a secretary, if so-and-so calls, tell them I'm not here. What is that called? Last time I checked, that was called a lie. Well, I'm covering for my boss. You're lying before God. Well, if I don't cover, he'll fire me. Vashti got fired. And somebody says, oh, he's not here. I begin thinking, okay, are they lying through their teeth? Or is he really, truly not there? She lost her home. She had this big, beautiful mansion. She was kicked out on the streets to live on the streets with nothing. Well, they can smear me. They can lie. They can tell lies about me. They can ruin my reputation. Which would you rather have? A bunch of lost, wicked, immoral, ungodly sinners say something bad about you, or hear God say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant"? Her reputation was smeared. You know, I've noticed, and I'm not going to get into politics, but politicians seem to have a knack. If they disagree with you, they will spread every lie they can think of to ruin your reputation. Doesn't matter if it's false, as long as it smears your reputation. How far would you be willing to go to please other people? Oh, I can't offend my co-workers. I can't offend my family. I can't offend my neighbors. So in other words, pleasing people is more important than pleasing God. Now, I know some of us, me included, we are more people-oriented than some of you. I was talking to someone last week, and it's like I never meet a stranger. Who was it? Abraham Lincoln said, "I'd never meet a stranger, just friends I haven't met before." I'm a people person. I can talk to anybody just about. But is it more important to please people than it is to stand firmly on God's word? Which is it? You can't serve both. You either serve God or you serve men. Which is it going to be? I said, well, I would be, I just can't speak up. Sometimes you don't have to. Somebody says, would you lie for me? You know what you can do? You can turn and walk away from it. You don't have to get into an argument. You don't have to get into the morality of lying and all of that. Just simply say, no, I'm not going to lie for you. Because God said, let your yea be yea and your nay, nay. Whatsoever is more than this is sin. Would you steal something if you really, really were hungry and really needed something to eat? Or will you take God's word? Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Vashti stood for what was right. It cost her plenty. And it may cost you. But in eternity, which is going to be greater? The praise of men or the praise of God?